Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Yagi, and I am on the board of directors, this year's treasurer, and I'm also the co-chair of the Standards and Image Committee. And this is where this is coming from. We are doing a lunch and learn, trying to once a month about things that are happening in our industry or things that we are hearing about that might need to be discussed in a group setting. So today we are at Managing Buyers' Expectations. We have with us Tim Hernandez, Brent Skoglund, Justin Landwehr, and Jerry Wolking. And then at the end down there, Jeremy and Rachel, and they are part of the committee, so they're going to help me a little bit today. I am going to start here by reading the antitrust disclaimer. Real estate agents and brokers should not discuss fees, commissions, or other information concerning individual prices, coverages, market practices, collective business practices, or any other competitive aspect of an individual company's operation with other brokers, as it is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which prohibits price fixing, group boycotting, and other antitrust violations. So as Sharon was saying, if we have questions, just use broad terms, X, not one, and I'll call you out if we start to go down a bad path. Okay. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves, where you're from, how long you've been in the business, kind of give your 30-second elevator speech, that would be great.
My name's Tim Hernandez. I'm with eXp Realty. I've been in the business 5 years, this November.
Brent Skoglund, Rule, Vendor office, been there 25 years.
Justin Landwehr, Navigate Realty, at least 10 years in the business, but I don't know how many more over that.
I'm Jerry Wolking, Keller Williams, been in business 32 years. I do both residential and commercial.
So we have 72 years of experience up on this panel for those of you who can't do quick math.
Yeah, about 50% of that is mine.
I saw Rachel's toes coming out, so I had to help her. All right, so I want this to be really conversational. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to direct it to the panel. If you guys have any input or further questions, just raise your hand and I'll call on you, because I want it to be organic and go back and forth. I don't want to just sit here and read my list of questions. Okay, so let's start with the first question, and we might not get to any others. So, how are you guys, if you have already started, presenting your EBAs to buyers, as far as explaining how this may or may not be a new process for you, and tying it into what's happening in the media? Go.
Personally, I wasn't using it because obviously it's mandatory on July 1, so I didn't necessarily do it all the time. Well, last month I had 2 buyers I was working with for the past 60 days, 30 days, or whatever it was. Found a couple homes that were FSBO homes and they wouldn't pay the agent. So I didn't have one in place. So I learned the hard way on those 2. So since then I have been presenting it on every first meeting. So.
Okay. And are you getting any kickback or any?
Not yet.
Okay. Brent, I know you've probably been using them.
Yeah, I've used a form of an EBA for probably about 15 years. And obviously it's a little bit different today than it was. I used to use it as more of a building trust tool to show the buyers, here are all the things we're going to do for you. Here's the things that we ask you to do with and to commit with us, to allow you to, or us to do that for you. But then I wouldn't have them sign it yet. And the reason I didn't before is because I hadn't done anything yet. I wanted to show you that I'm going to do the things that I say I'm going to do. And when you feel that you can trust me and know that we're a good team, then we can do that. Obviously with the new EBA rules, that will no longer be the case. So it's just education. It is really just emphasizing to have that buyer consultation before you go out and show properties, to educate them on how this whole process works, what all the things we're going to do for them, again, what we ask them to do with us. And obviously we earn a fee for doing that, and they would all agree. So just explaining that process, how it works, setting the expectation early, so that way you don't get into a situation down the road where you end up feel like you're, negotiating against your own client for a fee. So it's really expectation or setting the expectation and educating early has been my focus.
I'd say to go off of that, I let some negative media and just mindset set in around it, because I hadn't been using EBAs. They were presented to me when I started in the business, and I never used one until about 3 or 4 months ago. I did start using them with almost every buyer I have. And I found it to be the best tool to have a professional buyer consultation and set expectations up front. And I did not realize I was not doing that with most of my buyers. I was opening the door saying, here's what the purchase agreement looks like. We can do inspections, blah, blah, blah. Now I sit down with this form. It is very nicely laid out. Here's what you can expect from me, because they don't know. Some of my buyers haven't bought a house in years. They bought in Florida, or they're first-time buyers. And here's what I expect from you. And then I am able to have that FSBO conversation right up front, which I should be doing every time and wasn't, and had gotten burned a couple times. But it opens the door to just laying out all those scenarios with FSBO, expectations that I have of my clients, showing up on time, not bringing your dog, all the stuff we've been talking about lately, right? And I wasn't doing that in my buyer consultation. I was going with a purchase agreement, but not my expectations of them as we were house hunting. So really a great tool. And I'm actually glad we're all going to be having to use it on July 1st, because we're all on even playing field now with it. They can't say, well, Jerry didn't make me sign that yesterday. Well, should have, you know.
Jerry's going to real estate jail then.
I think it's great for it. I've skated on the edges many times. So I've never used one before in the past. You say never, only a couple of times. In commercial, it's not uncommon for a tenant or a buyer to ask for representation. They want to see agreement up front for X number of days or whatever the case may be. I've never felt the need to, because much like these two gentlemen just said, I'm very big on buyer consultation on first visit. And it's usually conversation regarding finance, regarding what they're searching for, what their expectation is. If you're $160,000 budget, you're not going to find a 4-car attached garage with a swimming pool. It's just not going to happen. So I have all that conversation up front. And very much like Brent said, I'm into building the trust factor in the relationship first. I've never worked, because quite frankly, there's some buyers I don't want to work with. We just fired one 2 weeks ago. I don't want to get tied into a buyer agency agreement for a long point of time. And myself, even though we have to do this, I haven't seen anything in law yet that's dictating how many number of days. So you can bet, for me, I'm going to be skating very closely to limited amount of time in the beginning till I see that buyer's a person I want to spend time with. Not only are make sure they're financially qualified, but is their expectation realistic? That's the way I'm going to approach it. I'm not signing a 60-day buyer broker agreement up front. I'm just not going to do it. It'll probably be short-term for me. But building the relationship and the trust, like Brent said, is key for me. And as Justin said, that form allows you to have open-ended conversations about the reality of what the market's about to do. We're going to go through dramatic change here in the next few days. It's going to be interesting to see how people react. But there's also nothing in that form that will hurt you or hurt your buyer, as long as each one of you perform as you're expected to do what you think you should be doing. So I'm kind of for the form. I like the idea that's there. I've just never felt the need to use it in the past, but now we've got to retrain and do that. So as far as when I present it, I'll present it when I feel it's necessary. And when I feel it's necessary is when I've decided, yes, I want to work with this person. Let me ask you this much as a group. How many of you present agency disclosures on your first initial contact? How many people, truthfully, you don't have to raise your hand, think with inside and answer to self internally. How many of you present an agency disclosure at your first significant point of contact? Just think about it. I'm going to guess less than 50% of you, because I don't. I've never submitted that agency disclosure form until I know for sure I'm going to be working with that person. I'm going to show them more than properties I know they're going to go get financed. Yes, I'm supposed to do that. That's what I'm talking about, skating on the edge of realty jail. Don't do it the way I do. I'm the worst agent in the business, okay? But I submit that when I think it's time to do that. We start talking price, we start talking money, we start talking time frame. Now I've got a significant conversation. That's when I submit it. So at this point now, you're gonna have to do things a little bit differently, but there's nothing in there that will hurt any of us. Next, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to let everyone know. So in a listing contract, that's a bilateral contract, right? Both people, both parties have to agree to terminate. in the exclusive buyer agency agreement for the association, this agreement shall begin on and terminate on, but either party may terminate this agreement upon blank days written notice to the other party. So it is a unilateral contract that can be.
Oh, that's nice to know.
Yes,
Never even thought about it that way. I
yeah.
love it. Okay, let's sign up for 60 days.
Yeah, for that very reason, because we don't, it's a different relationship with a
Yeah.
buyer on an agreement than a seller.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna flip this to you guys and have you guys ask the question, what do you think is the hardest part that you're gonna, the hardest part of the EBA that you're gonna have to explain to your buyers? What's scaring you the most? What's your biggest concern right now? Yes,
I'm gonna more like ask the question, because my initial question was gonna be, what would be the panel's 10-second spiel for someone who is not familiar with the law? And they're like, oh, no, I don't wanna sign that, I just wanna go look, look.
that's a great
How are you
question.
gonna present it to them in 5 to 10 seconds? Are you aware of the law that just changed?
I mean, I'm gonna say that this obviously, this agreement gives us full transparency. It allows me to be able to communicate with you back and forth, and it allows me to negotiate on your behalf for your best interest. As far as are you wanting, asking about the lawsuit itself?
No, I
Okay.
just want, when they say, well, I don't wanna sign anything right now, I just wanna go look. Because you have a lot of customers, consumers who will do that. I'm not interested in signing anything right now, I just have these two things that I'm looking at.
I think that's what's great with the law changing July first is we're all gonna be required to do that, so that's fine, and I'm not gonna chase that buyer. I'll say, I only work with buyers that are committed to working with me. If you don't wanna sign this, I can't show you this house. And then they can call 6 other agents and maybe get it. I don't know what's gonna happen after that, but that's not my problem. That's not a buyer that's committed to me. I don't have a relationship with them. I'm not gonna chase them.
And they're gonna call those other 6 agents, and one of them's gonna do it, and one of them's gonna waste their time, and they're gonna
Right.
realize, now I have to do it. So we're all gonna do it, just like I learned the hard way last couple weeks ago.
As soon as you asked the question, the word I wrote down right before Justin said it is commitment. If they're not willing to sign and be committed to you or anybody, they're not committed to buying a house. And what you said, they just want to look. I don't have time to just look. This is our job.
Computers for.
Exactly.
That's good. Anyone else? Yep.
To clarify, so before we can even ever show house, this has to be signed as of July first.
Before you can open a door.
And then my biggest part, where it's gonna be hard for me to explain is for when you have that conversation, you know, in the case that the seller can't pay the commission, you have to pay the commission, and how you let that, like, the best way to lay that out then.
Okay, so what if someone comes up to you and says, I'd love to work with you, but if that seller can't pay your commission, I can't do it. How are you gonna approach that?
I think, when we walked in the door with Isbos, same conversation happens with those buyers. And I'm usually, I'm lucky where most of my clients have paid me something in the past. I'm rarely working for zero. It's not always what I want, but it's rarely zero. I think having the conversation with, we will cross that bridge when we come to it. Here's the houses that are paying, that are listed, that are whatever. Here's the houses that aren't. We can try to negotiate that into our offer and go that way. I think it's gonna be a lot less buyers coming up with money than we think. So just like a for sale by owner, hey, we're gonna try to write that into our offer, write a strong offer and get me paid. It may not be the highest amount I've written on my sheet. It might be lower than that, and I'm okay with that and I have that conversation with the buyer. I'm okay with getting paid less than that. I understand they don't have $20,000 in the bank today, but hey, if we can get 5 out of the seller or something, let's go that route.
I think we also have to keep in mind, even though compensation will not be listed, it doesn't mean that it's not, I mean, you might list a house without the washer and dryer, but my client really wants a washer and dryer and I give you a good offer. They're gonna say, okay, you can have the washer and dryer. So I think we have to get in that mindset too.
Rachel, that's a great point. That's gonna be the biggest, strongest conversation you have most frequently is who's gonna pay and how. The first time home buyer market's gonna get crushed. They don't have the cash to come up and pay 3, 4, 5, 18, whatever the percent is. They don't have that. So you're gonna wind up negotiating that into purchase price. Seller doesn't care what the house sells for. The seller cares what the net is. You can sell the house for $580,000, but they only net $20. It doesn't matter what the 580 was. They're concerned about the net. You can build backwards from the net doing just simple basic math. If you can find out what that seller's net is, you can build your transaction from there. And most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, you're gonna get paid through the sale of the house. Has anybody in here ever sold for sale by owners? I've sold a bunch of them. I've never not been paid. I've only had one person who said to me, I refuse to pay closing costs and I refuse to pay a commission. Even though we offered over the asking price that covered those things, that seller refused based on principle, not on math. He didn't sell his house. And I don't know what happened to it after that, didn't care. If you can't see basic math is gonna net you this much money, I probably don't wanna work with you anyhow. So to answer the question, can't go there?
No, go,
Okay,
go.
okay, so to answer your question, build it into your purchase price.
Well, and
We
the
also
other,
having that conversation on this, on the listing side as well now, where if you're, you know, any good agent's gonna have a net sheet at the listing appointment, say, hey, this is what you're gonna walk away with. Then you should be adding a line that says, if you choose to buy compensation, you can expect
Yeah.
to have this come out of the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of our answers are gonna be solved on the listing time and by the listing agent. If you've got an agent who's coming in as the knight in white satin, you don't have to pay a buyer broker, we gotta get that person trained. But that right there is where a lot of it will start, is on the listing side.
Yeah, and I know this is a buyer expectation, course, but like, he said it's all gonna start on the listing side. And if, it's gonna be very intriguing to see, what percentage of how many sellers are not gonna offer a buyer broker commission. That's gonna be very intriguing. We don't know. We have no idea. If they do, it's a moot point. If they don't, then that's where we get into your question of, do you build, I know that some of our lenders are going to allow, our fee to be built into their financing, kind of like the closing costs, right? You get a 3% or 6% based on the type of financing that you can do for closing costs. I think it's gonna be handled a lot that way if the seller's not willing to pay a buyer broker fee.
your seller that is selling their home is likely gonna buy another home, correct? I mean, generally, so you have that conversation up front. If you're gonna offer zero compensation, then you're gonna have to expect when we go to buy yours, you're gonna pay that commission back to me anyway. So it's how you word it, it's how you build that trust. And I think communication will build trust. And I think, I don't, it's gonna change for some, like he says, especially the first time buyer market, but I think we'll still be able to survive.
That's what you look at, is the transaction pays the commission. It's a split between buyer and seller. It's the transaction that pays the commission. If there's no buyer, there's no commission. If there's no seller, there's no commission. It's the transaction that pays. Focus on the net for the seller, and then what's it gonna be out of pocket for the buyer? That's a good, again, first-time home buyers are gonna get crushed. If they don't have closing costs and then commission on top of that and down payment, you're asking, a 27-year-old newly married person or whatever the case may be to come up with $10,000 on a $100,000 house. And that's a lot for them.
So I think Amanda, you were in maybe the training I was in, that some lenders are saying they're gonna pre-approve, kind of like what Brent said. Pre-approve with the scenario of seller paying a commission and seller not. And so you have that conversation with your client on what their expectations are and what their search range is, depending on if it's offered or not. And then doing a buyer net sheet. So we have a seller net sheet, create a buyer net sheet.
So that leads us to our next question, Rachel.
You're
Thank you.
So,
When will you guys be giving the lenders your E EBAs?
great question. I mean, we haven't had
We haven't had to.
a lot about this. Like I said, this is all new as of Monday, and I think we're, the waves in the water are gonna kind of figure themselves out as we go. But I think right now it's just kind of an unknown. I mean, really, more importantly, it'd be after the offer is accepted. I mean, that way everyone knows up front kind of what's going on. Obviously, we've got multiple forms that are being, created, and having that initial statement form that says, here's the buyer, here's the seller, here's who's paying who what. And just get that to the lender as soon as the offer is accepted. That way they've got everything up front, not waiting until a week before the closing
So
going, hey, can you get
devil's
my commissions?
advocate, let's
Go for
say your buyer is gonna pay your commission.
Mhm.
You get an accepted offer, you send everything to your lender and lender says, your buyer can't pay you.
No, and that's true. So one of the things that we've talked a lot about in the office is if there's a situation like that where the buyer has to pay our fee, is you're contacting the lender before you make that offer and have that conversation. That's a great point. Because you want to make sure that you don't get them in, hey, we got an offer accepted. And then not
At
so much.
closing you,
So-
there's no money for you.
No,
Yeah, so make
that's
sure that's
awesome.
all happening as soon as possible.
Why
Cause
would a
you
buyer-
deserve to
buyer-
get paid.
Why would a lender say that you can't pay a buyer can't pay your?
If they don't have the
They
money
don't have
for
money.
it.
No
Oh,
money,
that's-
debt
that's a
income
given,
ratio.
yeah.
Yeah, if they don't have the money
The
for
lender
it.
didn't say no.
But right, I'm sorry. the pocketbook
Well, you'd be the last of those, right? So you'd be the one. that would be screwed.
We are the last to get paid.
I think it's just like when I go out and show it, like, you'll have an Iowa buyer that switches to Illinois, and I'll call the lender, hey, property taxes are 1,000 more, can they still do this? Or, hey, this is flood insurance, can they still do this? I think that would be a conversation you'd have openly with, as you're going out to show or write on those houses with the lender. Hey, we're now here, and my fee is this even doable? As you're about to write that offer.
Well, and I think the conversations that we need to have with our lenders is gonna be more so than it ever has been, right? Because they're gonna need to provide us with a little bit more details about that buyer before they even go out and look, not just some letter that says, hey, they're pre-qualified up to 180,000. Well, that's great. But then if you go write an offer for 180,000 and, they're paying our fee or closing costs or whatever, it's not gonna work. So they're sitting in these meetings like we are trying to figure it out. We'll get there. We'll get there.
It'll settle. You just have to adapt.
I think the big question is what happens to that remaining fee if your EVA says X and the listing agreement says Y, and you're off by X point Y, what happens to that X point Y?
It states that it goes to the listing
The listing broker.
broker.
This is why I asked when the new chairman was here.
It depends on what the listing contract
Yep,
says.
yep.
If you use the listing contract from the association, then that differential will go to the listing brokerage. If you use your own, I don't know what it says, because it will be determined, what happens to that differential will be determined by what the agreement was on the listing contract. Don't be putting those low amounts.
You can always hit them down. You can always hit them down.
It's non-negotiable.
Well, you know that we're gonna have agents in this market that will be running work with me for a flat fee, work with me for X amount of
But
dollars.
Bobby, it's fine. We're not gonna talk about this.
That class starts at 3, bro.
Yeah, that's in the black room. Back in the room, lights are out.
Now, this is all just general, and everybody can run the business the way that you run it, but that is what our form will say.
So I,
Differential will stay with the listing brokerage.
Okay, I'm lost here. Talk to me about differential. Tell me what you're talking about.
If your
Okay.
if your EVA says 2.4,
Mhm.
let's just say, and the buyer broker fee that the seller is willing to pay was 2.8, what happens to that point? That's what the question.
Take it off, Bryce.
No, you can stay
the
with
listing contract,
brokerage.
yeah.
So
The listing
goes to the list broker.
Mhm.
So why would
And
my,
the total commission that is on the listing contract.
Mhm.
The next step is how much the listing broker will retain.
Mhm.
The next one is how much the seller is allowing the listing brokerage to offer a buyer brokerage to bring
Mhm.
already willing and able buyers. But if the EDA is different from that price, is lower than that price, the law says, or the settlement says, or whatever says, about that, the buyer's agent can't get paid more than what is on the buyer's
Oh, I see.
agreement.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Well, that's, we had to decide where the differential was.
Then it
Okay.
is- then it is what it is.
So-
You either lower yours
Oh.
or the buyer pays the difference. So you can always lower. But if you're like, no, I'm getting paid X, then the buyer has to come up with the difference.
So if you can lower, can't you raise?
You absolutely can, but it has to be before the offer is written. Correct, Sharon?
No, you can come down, you can't go up.
You can't go up on your EVA once it's signed,
Yes, you
right?
can.
Yes, you can, anything is
You
changeable.
you can renegotiate your brokerage agreements at any time with that. What you're gonna have a problem doing is saying, you know what? I'm this kind of buyer's agent, and I'm just gonna put 0 on my EBAs, and then we're gonna go look at properties, because I'm a nice person. And then at some point in time, you're gonna have to ask them to renegotiate that buyer contract, because it's gonna have to be higher, you're getting paid 0. So you need to be very careful about what you are starting with your buyer, because your buyer doesn't care how much you're getting paid. They may care that.
Until it comes out.
But they're more worried about themselves, right? And so, deciding, well, we're just gonna put this, and then we'll raise it, or we'll lower it, or we'll do whatever. Don't think about that you're just gonna keep raising this, right? So put in what you or your brokerage policy is, your personal policy, your brokerage policy is on that. And that is what you are going to expect to get paid. If your buyer cannot pay that, and it hasn't been offered, then the two of you could negotiate that it could go lower, right? But you need, these are binding contracts, people. And that's what we have to remember. Purchase agreement, listing contract, they are binding contracts. You can't just be, changing them around all the time.
Is there another one coming out other than the one that came out in April?
Correct.
Yeah, brand new.
Big time.
Brand new, baby.
That's what I was like, but that's not how the current April. Okay, got it.
Okay, I'm gonna shift us back to the lending side of things. And ask a couple of different questions at the same time. So let's say a buyer comes up to you, they're not pre-approved. How do you have that conversation? And then how important is the pre-approval and who it is from right now with what's going on?
It's critical, pre-approvals
Yeah.
are sometimes worth toilet paper. So it depends on a lot of who that lender is and who that bank is. And because I'll just tell you, when we see certain names, whether you're a real estate agent, appraiser, a lender, an attorney, we do enough transactions that when we see certain names, Deborah and I, we know this one's gonna hurt, or this one's gonna be good, or we're gonna have to carry the load here, whatever the case may be. So what I am seeing a trend happen twice to us in the last 10 days is that sellers are asking for the pre-approval letter to be underwritten before, like, so we had to happen twice this month. And just dealing with a lender in Chicago now, she doesn't even offer a pre-approval letter to the buyers until that buyer has been underwritten, which is awesome, because we get a ton of pre-qualification letters labeled as pre-approval letters, and you come to find out nothing's been pulled other than credit. So,
Well, and that's the confusion too, because a lender, we have pre-qualification, pre-approval. Pre-approval is after they've been vetted, if you will. In the eyes of a lender, they don't even use pre-qualification or pre-approval. Once they are vetted and they've gone through all their W-2s and all that stuff, that's when they're pre-approved.
yeah.
And so, but I think that point is very valid, is that, for us, we should be educating our buyers to provide your W-2s, your bank statements, get that full pre-approval before you go look at houses, because honestly, that's an advantage to them in making an offer anyway. Because if the other buyers are just pre-qualified, toilet paper, or fully pre-approved, they're ready, willing, able, and committed buyer, period.
And you gotta look as an agent at that pre-approved letter and see what is the outstanding requirements from that lender. We just had an agent yesterday call us and ask for information, and Deborah said, well, the information's on the pre-approval letter, and the agent here locally in the Quad City says, oh, I never look at pre-approval letters.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you laughed for all of us.
That was the agent's comment, well, I never look at pre-approval.
How are you guys overcoming when the buyer's agent is unprofessional about you reaching out to the lender to validate the pre-approval?
You're looking out for your seller's interest.
Yeah.
We can do that.
You can do that.
Absolutely.
You have a relationship with that lender as well.
You should be doing that.
I
Great
should
point.
be doing
Yeah.
more of that.
Yeah, because
would
what we just
maybe-
said about pre-approval letters, half of them are crap. So you call the lender and find out and ask them, okay, how far along are you in the process or whatever? Well, I never met them. I just pulled their credit and their credit score is blah. You don't know what their verification of income is. You don't know if you even have a job. They just pulled off of a social security number and a credit score, and that's all they went by because they're doing mass quantities of loans. And so they know that they're gonna do 100 pre-approvals and at least 73 of them I'll get a loan through on. But it's just a numbers game. So I think you should be as a list agent, call it. If you don't know that lender, you don't know that bank, you should be calling to see if they're even legit. We just called the lender just last month. Remember that, Deb? Called the lender last month and here's what I got. Hello? And I went, I'm sorry, we're calling such and such, I can't remember what the bank was. We're calling such and such bank. And she goes, oh yeah, I work for them too. And this is on a $450,000 pre-approval. So automatically it was a step back and go, okay, we're not sure that's the buyer that we fired.
But I would say one thing I would do is just give that agent a heads up that you're gonna do that. You know, because there's nothing worse than if we get a call going, yeah, this listing agent just called about your buyer. Yeah, that adds a little tension, right? Just give them a heads up and say, hey, we just want to make sure that your buyer is fully qualified. So we're gonna give them a call. We're just giving you a heads up. It just kind of keeps the emotions out of the transaction. Yes.
I have a question about, do we have to have the, EBA signed before we have the pre-approval? I don't even sit down and have that conversation about getting the EBA signed until they're pre-approved.
Sharon,
So,
EBA's got to be signed
You have
immediately.
to have an EDA before you cross the threshold,
we can't,
either with a buyer, I mean, that's what the law says, right? So either with the buyer, arm in arm, or if you're going to do a virtual tour for them and you have crossed, but it's the real estate agent crosses the threshold of a door, you have to have an EDA.
so
that's not the question. So my question is, if we have, I don't have the EDA conversation until they're already pre-approved.
Well, you can have it whenever you want, you don't have to have an
So we
EDA
can talk
until
to them
you
about
cross the threshold.
Okay, we can talk about getting pre-approved before the EDA.
Now,
Well, let me give you an example. When we have that initial buyer consultation, a lot of times the buyers aren't pre-approved yet. We're just educating them. But the EBA's got to be signed at that time. Because now you're talking personal information, finances, all of that.
no, EDA by law has to be before you take them through a house.
That at the initial buyer
Yes,
consultation.
so if you're having the consultation at your office, I get a call today and I say, hey, can you meet me at the office at 5 o'clock? We have the consultation, then I can do the EBA. If they find out they haven't been pre-approved yet, okay, let's go talk to a lender first, get your money. Then when we're ready, start showing houses. Now I know I got a bona fide buyer that I can do business with. Would that be correct or not correct? I haven't shown many houses.
Before you show it.
Yeah,
Before you
Yes.
walk through the door.
yes, that's what I'm saying, before we sell.
You can talk to them for 3 months and get every personal information.
you have to have agency for that, though.
Agencies.
Agency you have to have
Good
before you
point.
talk about personal information. Before you walk through the door, you have to have an EBA
Yeah.
in the state of Iowa starting Monday.
That's a good point.
So why wouldn't
Yes,
we,
absolutely can. You should have a folder of them in
why
your
wouldn't we
car.
have, when we have that initial consult, why would you not have them sign it then?
You absolutely
You
should.
should, you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, yeah,
You should.
that's a great
It makes-
time to do
It
it.
makes it all,
But, you know,
Correct.
let's say there's that one example where someone is a sign call and they want to see the house and you're available, so you're like, okay, let's meet there, we can talk there, we can talk outside. Like Donna said, you're gonna sign this on the hood of my car and then we'll walk in and see the house.
Well, the thing is, guys, we're gonna educate the public very quickly.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to adapt to the, it's not us, we didn't make the law, we're just trying to follow it. So we'll get them educated fairly quickly.
I have a question, are there gonna be like listing agents out there asking for proof of that EDA? I mean,
They cannot.
or is there just gonna be a bunch of just?
They cannot, any more than a buyer's agent can't ask for a listing agent.
Ah, good point, good question.
Yeah, but the first call you make, when you talk to a buyer and they've looked at 3 houses with somebody and said, well, I didn't have to sign that with so-and-so, the very first call you make is make it to me. No, it is, because the MLS is taxed with,
Policing.
having the authority to police that you are using EBAs. And I'm gonna take this very, very seriously. It's none of this, I don't wanna get somebody in trouble. You need to stop that. I know you guys won't, most of you won't do code of ethics complaints, but this is license law. This is, in Iowa, it's license law, it will be license law. In Illinois, January 1, it's the NAR settlement, you need to do it.
Sharon, is there any plans to have like media conversations with newspapers and television
I
stations, this, that, and the other?
did Living Local yesterday and talked about buyer representation agreements. I'm doing an article in the Quad City Times about it. Just to worse that it's the law and this is what a buyer will expect.
I think we're making it more complicated than it needs to be. You're always, always gonna have, this weekend, I had someone call, wanted to see a house. I kind of knew them through someone. It was my listing. I said, hey, we need a pre-approval letter. It's gonna be cash. Great, send me a proof of funds. What's that have to be? I said, it can be a receipt, it can be a letter, it can be a balance statement, whatever you wanna give me. You won't show us the house without that? I said, no, we've already had 5 offers and it's gonna be a waste of your time. You're always gonna have that person, right? You're always gonna have that person. Don't chase those people. She hung up on me. We had the conversation. She hung up, probably mad at me. Never saw the house, never saw an offer from this person. I think they just wanted to see the house, right? It would have been a complete waste of my time to go anyway. So if you've got someone that is refusing, if I'm sitting on a listing appointment, why would I want a client that's refusing to sign the listing agreement? You know, so why would I want a buyer that doesn't want to sign that commitment with me to work?
Show a pre-approval.
Yeah, or doesn't want to talk to a lender to get a pre-approval. It's a waste of your time. So cut that person loose, move on to the 6 people that are signing this for you, that are looking forward to working with you, right? All my first-time buyers, they don't know anything different than this. They're not gonna ask me a million questions about it, right? They don't know any different. My buyers that haven't bought in 20 years, they don't know any different. Things have changed in 20 years. So the questions we're bringing up are that, I say, you know, like 1 in 50 that are gonna have a problem with it. There's people that have a problem with the listing contract. Those aren't my people. So the people who are having a problem with this, cut them loose. They're gonna have a hard time buying a house anyway.
Well, they're just not committed.
Right.
Or they're not committed.
Have you guys as panelists, have you ever had a buyer ask, how do I pay you?
Yes.
Yes.
It's happened
Absolutely.
numerous times. How do I
Now
pay
they
you?
know.
How much do you charge?
Now they know.
What's this gonna cost me? Now you know. Yeah, like Justin said, we're making it in some ways, because it's such a dramatic change, we're making
For
it much
us.
more difficult than it needs to be. Just explain who
You
you
show,
are. what
you
you're
show
doing,
your
this is
buyer
what
that
it costs.
value, you show your buyer that value in that relationship, they wanna pay you.
Absolutely.
They're not gonna not wanna pay you.
Yeah.
So the 2 that I lost, they wanna pay me, but I don't know what they're gonna pay me. So we'll see.
And you want more clients like that, and those people are gonna refer more
Correct.
people to you. I mean, that's how you build a really great business like Jerry and everybody else up here has, is the referrals from those people that love you, that wanted to pay you that day at closing, thought they were gonna bring a check to you at closing, didn't know. I mean, I had that happen 2 years ago. It's closing like, so much I owe you. I'm like, it's already covered, don't worry about it, you know, it's taken care of.
Yeah.
I didn't know they didn't know that. I never had to cover it with them.
Yeah.
And now they do.
That's what's so important about that buyer consultation, right? It gets all those questions. You know, I have a frequently asked, I try to put myself in a first-time home buyer's eyes, right? And think of all the things that they have no idea about. We do, because we do this every day. So when they're walking in that door, thinking of all the things that they have no idea, you know, what questions do they have? And one of them is that. And that's why going through this EBA right up front, explaining how we are compensated, how the process works. If the seller's not willing to compensate us, you get it up, you get it out of the way immediately. That way, if that does happen, if that situation arises, they're not hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
They're comfortable with it. They understand, and we don't have those problems.
Yeah.
I have a question back to the pre-approval versus commitment. At what point is it appropriate to contact the lender?
As the realtor,
As a list agent or as a buyer's agent?
As the listing agent?
Getting the offer,
When you get the
once you get
offer.
the offer.
I was just gonna ask, so is it there, it won't be disclosed if the listing agent, if the seller is going to pay the buyer's broker? So is it, I show my client the property, we have this signed, we're at 2%, I'm just throwing that out there. Do I, at that point, when they're like, oh, I wanna make an offer on this house, am I calling the listing agent and boom, hey, are you guys offering compensation for the buyer's broker? And then I go from there, because when you say, put it onto the purchase price or add it onto the closing cost, like, how does that look in the offer? I'm calling them and saying, hey, well, we're gonna offer 2,000 over because that's my compensation. Or how does that look after you move forward and they want to make the offer? And when you guys say, well, just go back, put it in the purchase price or the closing cost, like what is the domino effect there?
I think you're gonna be able to handle that a couple different ways. One is you handle just like a for sale by owner today, right? Is we don't know what they're gonna be willing to compensate us until we write it in the offer. You know, Jerry alluded to that before. Now, some agents will negotiate that compensation before they even show a house, but that's not doing our buyers any good because they want to see this home. So I don't even worry about it until I know that they like the home and want to make it an offer. So in that regard, we would kind of handle that the same way. We don't necessarily need to know what the compensation is being offered because I'm gonna put in my offer what we want for compensation anyway, you know, but to your point, yeah, I mean, it's helpful to know what the seller has already agreed, if anything, to compensate a buyer's broker for coming in. What's gonna be intriguing about this, going again to the listing side, if you list a new house and you've got 20 different showings, you're gonna be inundated with phone calls, text messages. So it's gonna be intriguing how that all plays itself out, right? That's, again.
Is it appropriate
working
though
through
to call and ask that listing
Sure.
agent, hey, are you guys offering?
Yeah, you have to, you have to.
That's how it's
Just like a
done in
for sale by
commercial
owner.
now.
Yeah.
In commercial, we don't use the MLS for compensation, we use, it's a CIE. And then CIE is if I'm an agent, I'm gonna go show a property to lease, I call that listing agent, what's the compensation being offered? And they tell us what it is. So we're already been doing this for months now, couple years, Sharon, year and a half, something like that, CIE. Yeah, so it's been working that way now. So every deal we're gonna write on, we all call what's compensation.
And I think that was, I just want to throw in every deal you're gonna write on. We're not just calling, hey, 1, 2, 3
Yeah.
Main Street's listed,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you got for compensation?
Not showing that one.
Yeah, you need to wait
That's the
to
whole
make
point.
sure your client actually has interest. Otherwise, we're gonna be accused of
commission
steering
steering.
people.
Yeah,
Commission
well, that's,
steering is very
that's the whole
careful.
point why the BBC is not on the MLS anymore.
Yep.
We're essentially doing the same thing.
Yep.
If that was the case.
So then Jerry, do you write that in your offer then?
No, I just get that, we use a written form. I usually want to see an email response. I'll even look at text, which you probably shouldn't do, but I trust the agents that I work with in commercial, so they give me some form of written compensation. Yes.
Dawn, before we go to you, Sharon's
Yeah,
flagging me down.
I wanted to say though, talk to your managing brokers. We had that discussion this morning about it is not binding until there is a written agreement. So a text, an email,
Yep.
anything like that is not a binding agreement. So if the listing brokerage is offering it, you know, with the seller's approval, you need to make sure that you are getting a binding agreement. Your brokerages will have those agreements however they want to term them, right? Because nothing is binding anymore.
Yeah.
If you put it on a billboard, you have a house and you're gonna put a picture on the house and you're gonna put what, you know, the listing or buyer compensation is on the billboard, that is not binding. The offer of compensation, the blanket offer of compensation in the MLS, which is being removed, that was binding once it was on the MLS. Nothing is binding now until you all have a signed written agreement.
And if I understand correctly, Sharon, we cannot, there's no document you can attach anywhere in the MLS talking about compensation. That you can't put it in additional documents or anything like that either, is that correct?
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Oops, you just fell off the skirting platform. We're no longer skirting.
Done.
Done.
She's been waiting.
This is
I
important.
feel like there was a little bit
Of misunderstanding. And so just please make sure that you are talking to your managing brokers because putting the offer of compensation in the purchase agreement, if there is an offer of compensation brokerage to brokerage already, it cannot go in that purchase agreement. If there already is one and it's agreed to, there's going to be broker to broker agreements involving that. So this is gonna be a distinct conversation that you're gonna be having.
Well, it can go in there, but it doesn't mean anything, because your purchase agreement is who's the parties to the purchase agreement, buyer and seller, correct? A broker to broker compensation doesn't belong in there, right? Because it's not a part. If there's already a broker to broker compensation offer, you need something different to bind that offer.
If there's not a
compensation.
broker to broker, that's
It
when
is
the
not
stuff you're gonna have to
broker
get that.
compensation, then that is when you would be, the buyer would be asking the seller to contribute in a concession. Which we do also have a new form for your purchase agreement, the additional for concessions.
Oh, excellent, okay.
Okay, done.
Done.
Finally, it's Dawn's turn.
Nobody else.
Okay.
No one's important.
So if on the listing agreement, the seller has agreed to X amount of compensation, okay, it's on the agreement. And as a buyer agent, you come in and you ask, is it required by the listing agent to disclose the amount that is on the listing contract?
The full amount? Or the buyer brokerage compensation?
I mean, if you call your buyer's agent, you call the listing agent, I'm gonna write an offer. And I say, is there compensation being offered? Are you required as a listing agent to say yes or no? Are you
Well,
required, if it's on the listing agreement, are you required to say?
Because on the listing agreement, it should state what they are willing to compensate a buyer broker.
Right,
Are you asking?
So
like,
that's
if
all
change
you,
For who the agent is, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
that's exactly, yeah.
I think you're asking, can it change depending on who the agent is that called you to show it?
So you tell me, yes, 2 point, just
Whatever.
general numbers.
Yep.
X, and then she calls and you say, why?
No, because it's.
Unless you
It has to be on the-
unless you have that
has to be
written
on the
out in
listing
the
contract.
listing contract, absolutely not, you
No.
cannot do that.
Because on the listing contract, it will state what the overall commission is and if any part of that will be offered as to the buyer broker. And if that's the case, that's what it is.
If somebody's
Because that's
changing
what the
X and
seller
Y,
agreed
then
to.
there'd be another.
Well, you just can't.
Right.
You just
I
can't.
but I could see that happening. So if I'm the buyer's agent and I'm writing an offer on your property and I call you and I say, hey, Brent, are you offering compensation? What will your answer be?
Well, it's what's on the listing contract.
So will you say yes, or will you say, yes, 2.4% is what is on the listing agreement?
Whatever's on the listing contract.
You would have to say what it is. I mean, and there's no secret to it, right?
Okay.
It's not finding
Because
that you're relating what's there, and it's going to directly
I'm Brian.
reflect your buyer, because if the compensation on your buyer agreement doesn't match up to that, then you're gonna have to deal with your buyer's agreement.
But I understand what she's saying because there's nothing. They don't have to provide us as the buyer's agent proof of what was on the listing contract. That's between the seller and their broker. So that's the point that she's saying. Now, that's an ethical, moral, and get your hand slapped fine deal, right? If you want to keep your license, but,
Well, here's what I could see.
okay.
Here's what I
Go
could
ahead.
see.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Hold on,
so,
hold on.
To certain people not disclose, they would say yes, period, the end. And then answer the question for another agent and they're competing. So I think that, like,
here's what I see.
Let Dawn share her example, please.
Okay, so we've already said that any remaining amount is going to the listing broker, right?
If you use the board's listing agreement.
Right, which
we do.
most of us
Yeah.
do. Okay, so, I'm just gonna put numbers in there for practical purposes. So let's say the agreement says 2.8 buyer broker commission. And I come in and I ask you and you say yes, and let's say I put in 2%, then they're going to get that remaining. Or what if she writes an offer and doesn't have anything on there, so then, that's what I can see some agents on the list side using that as they get it in their pocket.
That's a valid point. It's a
I
valid
see what you were
concern.
saying.
What she's saying is
Yes.
different compensation to different people for different scenarios.
Yeah.
So that compensation is floating is what she's saying.
Right.
And Sharon, we lived through that
That's
market
gonna
back in the
happen.
early 2000s. I was one of the recipients of that. So there was compensation different between broker to broker. You
Right.
might pay this broker 2.8, you might pay that broker 2.4. And we don't know as buyer brokers what the listing agreement says. So that's an interesting point.
No. Oh, yes. So a buyer broker does not have a right to know what the total compensation on a listing contract. All they can know is what the percentage for the buyer broker.
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They get that information.
Mhm.
The listing broker doesn't know what's on the EDA.
No.
So it's always
two
going
different
to be whatever that seller has said, they approve the
Right.
listing broker.
Right.
But what they're saying is, could shady list agents change? I agree that it's already in the
I
contract.
agree, I
it's in
did.
writing, But if there's no way
Time
to
when I was at
release
Reed.
that.
Oh, you're not talking shady agent.
So does it depend on
That's a
how?
broker's agreement. That is the broker's agreement. If they're playing with commission splits, that's a brokerage problem, right?
But how do you call it out unless you file?
Well, it's
You don't
not,
know.
that brokerage can lose their license. This is a brokerage agreement from a seller. You're getting into law problems at this point. This isn't code of ethics or rule or reg.
So if we call an agent, we're writing an offer, we call an agent and we say, is there compensating station being offered? And they won't tell you, they say, I can't disclose that, or I won't disclose that, then what do we do?
They have to disclose it to you because you have to know, they have to disclose it to you,
Okay.
right?
The broker knows the info.
It's not
I
a
don't know.
secret.
I mean,
It's only a secret on the
It's a good
MLS.
question.
It's not a
What,
secret
it's happened,
anywhere
because
else.
early 2000s, it happened between,
I
was
have a
Remax.
question.
There was one
I'm
company.
sure
that
our
had
term-
zero
broker
compensation
agreement.
through Remax.
What do you got? Ben, what do you got there? That's,
It's just a broker to broker, go ahead, it's just a broker to broker seller agreement. So if I'm writing an offer and I just text the listing agent, hey, we're writing an offer, do you have a buyer broker agreement? Send it over. And they just send, and so we just have to have them send it over, it just explains it in a form.
So you're sending that before your offer or with the offer?
Yeah, just, I think, I don't know, what would you do? I'm writing an offer and just say, hey, by the way, we're writing an offer, we just,
Send it
as I'm
All
preparing
of
this
your
offer.
managing brokers will be talking to you about this
Yeah,
very soon. because this
yeah,
all was
yeah.
already
Mine
needs
already
to-
did, so that's what I'm saying.
Company policy stuff, we're not talking.
Okay, so let's get back to managing the buyer's expectations. I have another question for you guys. Yeah, Sarah. Hey, guys, everyone listen up, please.
Kind of like an easement of like, people are saying, you know, how do I get my buyer to trust me on like minute one of meeting them at the buyer consultation? And the really key thing is there is a timeline that if they give you written notice, they're not married to you forever. It's not like, if you choose to do a written notice of 60 days, I mean, I don't want to be tied to someone like Jerry's point. If I don't want to work with them, I want to be able to let them know in writing right away. There is a time frame. So I think you could very easily say like 2 days, that it takes away that quick sign call of maybe shady buyer agent to say, oh, well, just tell them that I don't, you know, that you want to disagree or, you know, end that contract and sign with me today. So give it time, but you do have like a 2-day out or a 3-day, whatever you choose to get out of that exclusive buyer agreement if you don't want to work with them or they don't want to work with you. So it's not something that has to be, the timeline of it being legal is there, but there's also that other timeline that you can get out of it in writing. So
Yeah, well, I think
that
as
kind of
Sharon,
falls there.
as Sharon said earlier, it's a unilateral
Yeah.
contract, so you can say, I'm done.
I'm done,
Yeah.
and
It's more of
in
a letter of
day,
intent,
that's
really.
great, that's great, in a day, then they can go be with whoever they want, or, you know, however that works, but it doesn't have to be the whole timeline.
I think we can all see, there's a lot to learn here in the next 30 days, from both list side, buy side, client side. It's all gonna be a learning, it's important that we all remember, to try to work together. That's gonna be a key component of this. And there's gonna be cowboys who are gonna show up and try to do things different and not to the norm because they think they found a way to cut the fat hog. Well, as they say, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, so keep that in mind.
Haven't I heard that other markets have been doing it this way for?
Yes.
It just showed a house this morning, and they've already said no buyer broker compensation. So I called the agent, I said, am I seeing this correctly? There's no buyer broker compensation. The agent said, yes, I have talked extensively with the seller. I've tried very hard to get him to understand the importance. He refuses to because he just bought in California and they're already practicing this. So he's gonna go by the California way of doing this. I have
In
to
two
buy it, so
thousand
let's
and
see what
six,
happens.
my daughter had to sign the GBA in Texas. So there have been state laws with EBA. We're not the first people to ever trip over this. Right? So it works in other areas. You're fine. If you end up, like Don said, if you end up with these people that are just trying to mess around, call their managing broker or call me and I'll talk with their managing broker to make sure that they're fully informed of what the laws and rules are. Because there are a lot of people that aren't, because they're the people that aren't sitting in this room. Or any other room.
Well, I asked the question because I've heard it on the streets that it's not going to be required to be disclosed. So I don't
The
know.
streets don't know really what's going on.
Her streets are other realtors.
Yes. This is not.
So my question is, if you're representing, if you're representing a seller and they're gonna offer buyer's compensation, you start to get showing requests, are you immediately gonna reach out to the agents and let them know? Or are you gonna wait, and now obviously not through the MLS or showing time or anywhere else, but you're gonna text your email and let those agents know that there's a compensation, or are you waiting until the offer comes in?
Good question.
And
That's
in
a great
our office, we talked about like how FISBOs say buyer's agents welcome.
Yeah.
Can we put that in our agent notes, whatever, kind of let you know that, hey.
No.
that's-
No.
No reference to anything having to do with trying to state whether or not, like, you can't put, you know, write a word and use an E backwards or something.
We love buyers.
You can immediately reach out to agents as soon as showing time puts something through saying there's a showing request saying that there is a compensation. Or are you gonna wait for the offer?
That's a great question. What do you think, Sharon? So as a list agent, can I have a
I
document
would
prepared?
wait for the buyer to call the list agent, you know, you don't need to do.
But
that.
if you want to,
Yeah,
Troy, you
buyer
can.
is-
Troy, I would wait for you to text me, Troy, because you're gonna text me and say, hey, is there
I'm-
buyer's comp?
If you're
Yes.
not calling the listing agent before you are submitting an offer anyways, before any of this happened, there's a problem there.
But I think
So
what,
that calls needs to be made regardless of compensation.
yeah, but I think what he's saying is that if you schedule an appointment to show a house, as a listing agent, reply, because you approve the showing, send a quick text and say, hey, buyer broker's fee being offered is this, right?
That'd be the right
I
thing
think
to
that's
do.
advantageous as a listing agent.
You can
Now I've
definitely
got you looking at my list.
And FYI, if you, even if your sellers are approving it and showing time, you're getting, you're set up with the text, the notification, just to let them know, that phone number is right there for you. You take your finger like this, your phone will pop up and say, do you want to text this number? So without any work on your part, you can text it and say, FYI, 123 Main Street is offering BBC. It will literally will take you less than
Something
3
relative.
seconds to do
It's
it.
something we all should do. Yeah. It's professional.
But you got road.
One of our agents suggested that they put a bunch of the papers that say how much the seller signs it and say he will be paying this, put them in the house. So when the showing agent, you know, they show it, then they know, they take that with them. So is that okay?
And also that it could be. Just don't write it on the list.
No, it'd just be a separate piece of paper in the house.
Yeah,
There also.
and like a flyer.
Post it on their counter.
There you go, like a flyer.
Yeah, in your binder, yeah.
3%. I don't care where you put it.
Then why can't it be put in showing taxes?
Because it's ran by the MLS.
That's through the MLS.
The part of the.
So then that means we can't even communicate, like.
So-
Don't do showing, not
Rach-
showing time messages. It would have
Rachel has
to
a
be
good
separate
point.
text
A lot of you
message.
guys do the binders at your listings.
Yeah, there you go.
Put it right in the binder, front page.
What if your seller wants it to be disclosed?
Can't.
That's what they're doing.
You can in the MLS, you can on your binder.
Obviously, by law, we can't do that, but by MLS law, we can't disclose that.
You could call.
You can put it on your website as long as it's not tied to an MLS.
Writers, you can put it in the house.
MLS or MLS gender related product. And also be careful because I heard that there's gonna be companies that are gonna try to sell us and say, hey, you just give us your listing and then we'll send out an email blast to all the contacts in your association of what the compensation is. Be careful because those are being watched by the people doing the lawsuits. So that could easily then be a problem as well. So there's not gonna be an easy like button on it, that's just gonna keep communication.
Yeah, the one thing we talked about is just have your broker, compensation, what is being offered to the buyer, have that form signed by the seller, take a screenshot of it, have it on your phone. Someone asks,
Great idea.
you just send it.
Great idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah, Donna.
Do you all see that we're gonna have an influx of non-represented buyers?
Say again?
Do you foresee that we're gonna have an influx of non-represented buyers?
I kind of expect that, Donna, because
Yeah.
pre-1995, there was no such thing as buyer agency.
Yeah.
That's one thing about being the old dog in the game, is I remember when there was no buyer agency. We all every single one of you represented my seller when you came in a listing. That was prior to 1995. So we've been through these changes before, we just have to adapt again.
So
But-
listing agent shows the house, non-represented, non-agency, or they come in on open house and then you would expect that the offer be written by an attorney or not scribbled on a cocktail napkin.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's happening.
So how does that handle at open houses, Sharon? What's the protocol there?
They
Okay.
are excluded.
I'm glad you asked.
That's okay.
Okay, so open house is, if you're the agent, is the designated or appointed agent for the brokerage for that seller, you are working as an agent of the seller, right? So buyers can come in, come out, they can tell you all their life story if you want, because you told them not to, but they're gonna do it anyway, right? And so, someone decides, oh, I'm really interested, I think I wanna write on this, I'm not represented by anybody. Then you say, okay, you know what? We need to have another conversation about that, certainly. Before dual agency and all that, but before you would write that purchase agreement, you would need to have an EBA. They've already toured the house, maybe you're gonna tour it again with them, but I mean, if you're gonna become a dual agent, you need to have that EBA with the buyer. You're gonna, of course, control the numbers because you're a dual agent. If someone in your company is gonna sit at your open house because they wanna collect buyers, they're still working as an agent for the seller, right? So they can collect all the names they want. But then if they are going to meet with those buyers and go show them around houses and stuff like that, they're gonna have to get an EBA signed. An open house is there for the seller.
Yes, so, but how does that relate to before the threshold payment? Do you let the buyer walk into the front door?
Oh, if
And
you're
open-
an agent of the seller, you are not their agent.
So
You're not a
they're
buyer
seeing
agent.
open houses is not a showing. Open
Correct.
house is-
Correct.
Okay.
It is excluded.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what if you do have somebody, a buyer come through and they say, no, I'm not gonna sign an EBA. I wanna write an offer, I wanna buy this house, but I'm not gonna sign an EBA.
Good luck with
So
it.
do you send them to their attorney then to?
Send them to their attorney, send them to someone else that they're gonna sign with, because you cannot write that. purchase agreement
So
without-
that would not be considered because that buyer chose not to have representation. I couldn't give them a disclosure of non-agency and write the offer for them as a ministerial act. Okay.
No. I would not do that.
I don't think you wanna do that. I think down the road, you
Liability.
might open yourself up to.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, but it's a scenario.
No, yeah.
So-
I would be very comfortable.
I'm not.
Sending people, going on a collab center, sending buyers out, listing sheets, sending buyers out, the virtual tour. Photos, in our MLS is not a tour. None of that, you don't need an EBA for any of that. You don't need an EBA to sit down with their lender and their attorney and talk about everything they've ever done in their life. You only need an EBA when you're gonna take them and show them out.
So are we gonna see more dual variable? Well, I guess that's.
There is no
that's all-
dual variable.
But I mean, I think it also is just a conversation with your seller, of like, here's the pros and cons of an unrepresented buyer potentially going through escrow on this property, right? I mean.
Yep.
Well, look at how competitive offers are. I mean, I just feel like buyers or unrepresented buyers might get sick of losing over and over again until they realize that all the winning offers have agents representing them and helping them prep the best offer. So yeah, maybe they're gonna write a couple offers and lose out, but they might be themselves out of any competitive offers by not having an agent.
Just like a physical.
Yeah,
And they're gonna pay their attorneys.
and they're gonna
right,
pay their
without-
attorneys too, yeah.
Well, the thing we also have to keep in mind is that we're currently in a seller's market, right? You know, how's this gonna change if and when the market changes a little bit to more of a buyer's market, right? A lot of this will become a moot point because the seller is gonna say, oh yeah, bring your buyer, I'll pay your realtor, right?
That's very true.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, so.
This tide's gonna change a lot in the next 24 months. And it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see amendments to or changes in the laws themselves. Because I think it's a disruptor. I think it's gonna disrupt how the market is done. I think it's gonna disrupt pricing. It's gonna disrupt a lot of things until we either adjust to find the ways or we have to adjust the laws that caused the mess to start with.
Well, I don't think the laws will change because like we talked about before, this has been happening in other markets for a while. It's unfortunate, our market is the one that's gonna have to adjust, but kind of like we talked about before too, is that educating the public is gonna be key, so they know and understand as well.
That's why I don't think it's gonna be that big of a disruptor, Jared, because real estate is local.
Yeah.
You know, just like that. I mean, there are some markets that are buyer markets right now.
Yeah.
Ours is not.
Right.
It's just gonna come down to, we have a supply and demand issue. That is plain.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see if it's a disruptor in this, I'm just talking about this market local. And it'll be the first 30 days, are gonna be the most chaotic, first 15 days. And then after that, it'll settle out. Everything always gets fixed, nobody's gonna die.
Everyone knows.
Yes.
Everybody dies here.
Say we have this I have this EBA signed with my client, but I have a team. So can my team show my client, like when I'm out for whatever
They will
reason?
say, you'll put the team name on those
Okay.
lines. There's nothing you list anyways, it doesn't have.
So
But
that,
in general though, like say people, we don't ever get,
List them all separate.
like if somebody's on vacation in my brokerage and they're like, can you show this house? And like, I just do it for free because it's like something I'm doing for them. Am I
Right.
allowed to show their client?
There's a
yes,
flip phone.
Sharon, I think I know what you're gonna say, so say it.
One more form.
There is a form.
Brokerage agreement. The listing contract is a brokerage agreement, correct? They have appointed an agent. If you go out on vacation and they do a new designated or appointed agent, we have a form that you fill out. A buyer rep agreement is a brokerage agreement. It covers anybody in the
Okay,
brokerage, right?
Yeah.
Now, should you not have, because you do have the appointed or designated agent on that form, should you probably not have the additional appointed designated agent form? Probably, right? To keep it legal. But if it's a one-off, you just make sure your buyer knows, hey, this person is gonna do a show for me. Also make sure the listing agent knows who's going in the property.
So that's what I was gonna kind of segue to real quick, especially for people with lots of teams or people showing for other people. One of our biggest conversations at our last standards and image committee meeting was that if you are requesting a showing in showing time and you are not the agent that is actually going to show the home, you need to do one of a few things. You need to do the pull down and put the agent that's actually gonna show the home in showing time. You need to text or call the listing agent and tell them who is gonna be doing the showing, because the seller needs to know who is going into their home. So like for you guys, for example, if you set the showing request, but we know that you're gonna go show the house, we should have your name as the agent. And I'm sorry, I'm just pointing at you guys. You have no idea who I'm pointing at. So it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, but so the agent who's actually going to do the showing, regardless of if they requested the showing, needs to be either in showing time or a text message or a phone call. And that is going to be new policy here shortly. You're welcome.
Good, because that's been something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it does. It does, especially with like big teams or, things like that where
It could
they,
be any situation.
Yep.
If you have anybody showing for you, let me know.
okay, so now that we're talking about showings, let's get back to buyers and stuff like that. Let's see. Okay, let's say you guys have a last minute cancellation. Let's say you have 4 showings in a row. The third home, your buyer's like, this is the one we're gonna write. What do you do with the 4th showing?
Well, obviously, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call that agent and let them know, since it's short notice. I mean, there's nothing worse than getting a cancellation notice 5 minutes and your client's already left home. They probably are gonna leave home in this situation, but just pick up the phone and communicate. I mean, we're all professionals. We all get along for most part. Except for Bobby wants to misbehave. Just pick up the phone. It's simple.
So Jen Peters, who is not here today, had a great suggestion for when that happens. If your buyers know that they don't need to go see it, maybe you still go see it as the agent and you give feedback.
I've said that before. I pulled up, we were doing 12 showings on a Saturday, out of town client. Pull up, she goes, I crossed this off the list. I didn't want to see this house. I'm like, well, we're already here. We're gonna run through so I can give feedback. Just come with me. Came through, they wrote an offer on that house instead. They're good friends of mine now, but I mean, she goes, she was mad. She's like, we crossed this off the list. I'm like, no, we didn't. Well, she goes, this is the effing house. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So I would always encourage the buyer to give feedback and to see you've already got the time blocked. You've already put the seller out of their house if you're that close on time. Obviously, if it's morning of or something, yeah, I'll try to get it canceled, but give the feedback. The sellers need the feedback.
Well, and it kind of goes back to, again, the buyer consultation is educating them appropriately. That when we schedule an appointment, we're gonna go see that home. And that's why you as a buyer need to do your diligence to either drive by the home, make sure it's in the place that you want before we actually schedule those. And I know it's hard because, we would need to get into houses as soon as we can. But yeah, for that reason, just set the expectation. Once we schedule it, we're seeing it.
I have 2 buyers right now that are trying to figure out where they want to live in which part of Illinois. So now I'm starting to make them drive the neighborhood, look at the house on the outside before we're gonna book an appointment. Because there's nothing worse than booking it because they want to, and then 2 hours later, they say, oh, I don't like that area. And I gotta cancel it.
Yeah.
So they're gonna drive by.
Yeah, and for feedback, guys, it's buyer's agent. Oh my God.
Thank you.
It is so easy to click a few buttons, but I would say, what, Deb, 30% of the time, we don't get feedback on our listings. It's critical to the seller. If you've got the audacity to walk in somebody's house, have the courage to at least tell them what you think about it. You can do that diplomatically. It's the truth. Why do you have to beg and send multiple times for feedback? We've got a beautiful little system called Showing Time. It's like 4 questions. You fill it out and send it in. It just drives me
Unfortunately, you're probably
nuts.
talking to all the ones that give the feedback.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. You are indirectly affecting your buyers when you don't give feedback on that listing. Because what if that listing is something the buyer has an interest in, but he feels it's $10,000 overpriced, therefore he's not offering, but they don't tell you that because they don't want to sound like they're the cheapskate and not make an offer on that house. But now you give your feedback as the agent to that seller that you feel that house is overpriced by $10,000 to $15,000, shows, well, just not what the buyer's looking for. We felt the price was too high. And now the seller has gotten that feedback 4 times from the agents who did give feedback. And now the seller reduces his price by 10 grand. And guess whose buyer's interested? Yours. It's not difficult to do feedback. And if I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sorry. Let the choir help me sing, right?
But it's being recorded, so the other people are seeing it.
Can you tell I'm old and irritated? Gee.
When you start moving your chair.
I'm about to stand up. You can't get along. Let's get going.
I'm glad you're.
Hey, can I make a comment while we're on this topic?
Yes.
When you are also booking your home inspections, can you put in that little box who the inspector is and who all is gonna be in that house for the inspection? Because the seller has a right to know who's in their house.
Yes,
agreed.
And how many people. And how many people. And are they bringing their littles and they're gonna be breaking stuff?
Okay, so let's talk about, when you're doing your buyer consultations and price range comes up and how important that is in today's market. Should we be looking at a $200,000 house if I'm only pre-approved to 175 in today's market?
I think I cover the market every time in a listing or buyer consultation, but to cover, it's a good marketing strategy to price a house at 195 that you know is gonna go 220. So having that conversation with the buyer up front, if you're pre-approved for 195 or 200, we're gonna be looking at a lot of homes that are gonna go 220. That's a really important piece of setting the expectation up front for when their 4 offers get rejected and we're back down to looking at 185s, 175s. I mean, I think that's a really easy way to put it, because the market is still like that in the Quad Cities. And there are a lot of listing agents pricing at 195 on purpose, knowing it's gonna go above that 200. So that's your name.
Yeah.
And now we have a whole new thing, when we have to throw commission in there.
Yeah.
I know.
I just told the buyer yesterday, it's no longer the asking price, it's the starting price.
The starting price,
It's
you're
the
right.
Starting price now.
And time on market is obviously very important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got that we all have that $150,000 buyer. Wants Davenport or good area, 3-bedroom, 2-car garage, full basement. They're just not there. So we have to start that expectation. If it's on market for X amount of time, well, maybe we can go there. But right now, when it's a brand new listing, it's not.
Yeah, we're to the point, if it's 7 days on market, we're wondering what's wrong with it.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's just setting the expectation with price range for a buyer.
Well, and that's why it's so important for us to truly have our thumb on the pulse of the market, because it does change and we need to know when that changes. Because the issue we're having now with clients is that they're pre-approved to 200, but they don't want to look at anything that's 200, knowing that it's probably going to sell for more. I mean, and then of course, they don't want to look at anything 175 because they're pre-approved to 200. So that's just that's just the way the market is today, and until it changes, that's just the way it's gonna be.
So how about the current buyers that you guys have, with the upcoming changes in the next couple of weeks? Are you gonna suggest that we talk to their lenders and get an updated pre-approval? Or you just, what's your plan there,
I feel like you're
guys?
telling me, not asking.
You better. No, I'm just joking. What is your plan?
Updated pre-approval on their price, you mean?
Yeah, because what if
What if we have to cover the
now
buyers?
they need to cover commission?
Yeah, well, there's only so much juice in the orange, so
Yes,
if a buyer is only approved to 200,000, whether it's a buyer EBA or not, doesn't matter. They can only afford 200,000, and that's gonna be driven by the rate. Because if the rates escalate from 7.5 to 8.5 or 9, or whatever the case may
Not
be,
happening.
that changes.
And you got out of the
Yeah. Yeah.
But that
I don't know
also,
what country you live in,
but that also goes back to the importance of knowing if there's a buyer broker fee being paid by the seller, right?
Yeah.
Is because
Absolutely.
that is what dictates that. I want to go back to the original part of the question, because a lot of times when we approve our buyers, it's not on the price. It's on what their monthly payment what their comfort level is. They may be approved to 300,000, but if they're only, after their down payment is only comfortable with the house, it's gonna be, 250, then we're gonna do that. Because lenders are very willing to give loans a lot higher than what a buyer might be comfortable with.
Yeah.
So again, buyer act, consultation and educate.
I think
So-
most of the time buyers are not comfortable with their pre-approval.
Exactly,
They don't
right.
want to spend that, yeah.
Okay, so I'm a buyer, I bring you my pre-approval and
Did you
it's.
sign an EBA yet?
No, I have not. I'm willing to sign one. Though. Thank you. And you don't know who this pre-approval is from. You've never heard of them. They're from Hawaii. What is your conversation?
My conversation is, thank you for bringing the pre-approval. I appreciate it. I'm gonna let you know that the listing agent on the properties that we're gonna eventually write an offer on would rather work with the local lender, as I would too. If we have any issues, I can pick up the phone or I can go in the office and talk to them. I can't go to Hawaii. I mean, I can, but I don't want to.
You don't want to?
No. So I mean, a question is, do I want people to change lenders? No, but in that situation, I'm going to. I worked with, whoever worked with Rocket Mortgage on a deal ever before.
Okay. That's good.
I mean, they're fine, we closed, but I got a phone call every other day from a different person. Hey, this is where we're at, this is where we're at. Huh?
They called you?
They called all the time. I didn't like that, but again, if I'm a listing agent and I'm taking an offer, I'm looking at who that lender is and where it from. We all are.
Ask us to get a local approval.
Well, and I think part of that too is that if we see that they're pre-approved with somebody that's out of market or out of state, right, that don't understand that we use, abstract to close a transaction, it will make that transaction a little harder. However, it is up to our buyer. It is up to our buyer what lender that they want to use. So I'm going to suggest that we get a second opinion from a local lender, and then, but it's their call. It's their call. Do we sometimes have to work a little bit harder? Absolutely, just like selling for sale by owner. But it's about our client, and we'll do what we have to do.
We just got a pre-approval from a lender in Chicago that we'd never heard of, but we'd heard great things about this person. And this buyer did in fact write an offer, but before I wrote the offer, I called the lender because I was a little apprehensive on who is this lender and can they do what they say they're going to do. I was blown away. Not only were they an outstanding lender, but they communicated from 7 in the morning till 11 at night immediately with responses, which we shouldn't expect that, but they did. But more importantly, not only did they have this person underwritten pre-approval, but they had a $7,500 grant for this buyer that no one else locally had offered. And I said, where's this grant coming from? She goes, it's the state of Illinois. It's an IDA grant for anyone in the state. So look what we discovered by using someone we never heard of before. We just sent that person another client.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think it's important to, before we jump and attack them about, ooh, let's go with a local lender, just say, is this a lender you've used before? Tell me why you chose them. What do you know about them?
Yeah.
Make them,
That's a great point.
don't be
Yeah.
attacking them right away,
Right.
and then help them understand the benefits of, you know, the local
hand in the
lender
back.
situation.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the banking lending side for over 20 years for real estate. So I really think it's crucial just to make sure that you communicate with that lender if they are outside the state. There's a lender in Arizona right now who I absolutely love. And they just really great at communication. Just try to communicate with them. If they're not good at communication, obviously it's probably not going to go that well. But I think using a non-local lender is not the end of the road. Sometimes it might be better. I mean, it depends on the circumstance, I guess. I don't know. That's just my.
No, it's a great point. One of our favorite lenders is in North Carolina. She lends all across the country. This lady in Chicago lends all across the country. So,
I just closed a deal with Jerry where the lender was in Colorado, my buyer was in Washington DC.
yeah,
And it was gonna be, it worked great.
Yep.
So.
they were a good lender too.
Okay.
Come on, give us a hard one.
I thought we started with the hard one.
It's good though, Jerry, because there are some buyer agent representatives that would be reluctant if you're competing to look at an alternative local lender and they don't know how to navigate that conversation. So I think it's a great conversation to have, just like Brent had said, I think it's great to have two opinions and maybe say, hey, maybe you can have two pre-approvals, I can advocate for that, and at the end of the day, you can choose whoever you want, but at least I can show the local lender in your competing offers.
I think that's a great point because sometimes the competing offers, this pre-approval just gets thrown over there.
Yeah.
If you're competing. So I like that idea. getting
Well,
the two
and as an
different ones.
agent representing a buyer, if you have an out-of-town a lender, and you send that offer to the listing agent, have a conversation and say, look, I know this is not a local lender, but here's their, how much we've used them in the past, or their success rate. Unfortunately, you have to have that because as we know that every offer, it's not just about price. There's so many different things involved, and that's one of them. If you have two offers that are really, really close, one offer might be negated simply because they're not a local lender, which